I would go out into duty sections, into work areas, and people would have this stuff pinned up in their cubicles. And I'd be like, you have my letter pinned up there. And they're like, oh, yeah, I've made like 5 copies. I sent one to my mom. And, they go on and on and on and on. And I'm thinking, a piece of paper with a nice professional note signed by me, recognizing just a little glimpse in their year.
Hey, Chris G here, Hard Hat the CEO, and it's time to have another episode. Yes, it's gone by a week, I guess. It's Thursday. Today I have David Nordell with me today. David's got a long history of writing books and military service, which we appreciate very much, and all kinds of good things we're talking about. But mainly what we're going to lead into before David introduce David here, we're going to talk about leadership and how to create those teams that you guys can turn those reins over and let somebody else run your business while you be the CEO. But help me, everybody. Welcome, David Nordell, please.
Hey,
how are you today?
Chris, thanks a bunch. Yeah, I love the topic because not every hard hat is ready to be a CEO. I'd say all hard hats aren't ready to be a CEO. Anytime you take a step up, it's new. And so you come with a lot of skills and you come with experience, but you also don't know what you don't know. So hopefully we can fill some of those gaps today and then walk through that. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, some contractors, they've got they're a painter, but they don't own the painter business.
Right.
And there's a lot of different things there involved and so forth. Talk about plumbers and all that. We talk about a lot of things. Even, I used to be that way. I used to be able to do everything myself and realize that's not the way to do things. And that's been years ago, but have evolved since then. Thank the Lord. And tell us all about your history.
Yeah. So grew up in rural Northern California in a dairy farming community. And, I come from a stock of Portuguese dairy farmers. So that's kind of, foundationally, that's what it was all about, up early to work. And, I watched and participated in a lot of hard work. And I had some pretty formative people around me who had to be the CEO and the milkman. So there's a corollary there. I tell people, I think everything that you need to learn in life, you can learn on the farm. Everything from handling, life and death and Mother Nature and setbacks and adversity and triumph and good crops and bad crops. And you got to be financially astute and there's a whole level of resilience and persistence and courage. And so good tools to leave home with. And at 19, I took off and joined the military, and I didn't know if it was going to be 4 years or 40. It ended up being 30 years of Air Force time. I wanted to go in the Navy and be a plumber, and as God would have it, he put a Navy recruiter in front of me who was having a bad day, and the Air Force guy put his arm around me, and it changed that trajectory. And then I told the Air Force guy, all I want to do is be a plumber, work with my hands, and kind of in the mold of some people I had in my family, and that didn't. The Air Force decided that I needed to go into medicine, which was not even a thought of mine, and it was absolutely a perfect match as far as aptitude and kind of what I'm cut out for. So it was great. On the medical side of things, that led to me, finishing nursing school and being a shock trauma emergency room nurse, and obviously, took me through, 4 contingency tours, combat tours, and there's a lot to that side, but 30 years of service, I tell people, the day that you walk into the military, they start developing you as a leader. And really what they're doing is they're trying to prep you for the next job. You don't know that, maybe a little later on. And then, towards the end, when you're the person that's prepping the people to do the next job, you kind of have that viewpoint, then you really get the big picture. So that deliberate development of how to get there and those type of things. So that may be relevant to our conversation today for sure. And raised a couple kids along the way. Been married 32 years, and bounced around all over the world. Retired to Montana. Like I told you today, I'm down in Arizona, but retired to Montana, and we just try to keep moving and giving back. And you talked about writing books. Never thought I'd do that. Kind of got a challenge and end up writing a couple. So it's all that stuff is out there for people to absorb and to take. It's not about me anymore. It probably never was about me. I talked to a buddy of mine that I ran into years later that was in that little small town with me, and we actually both live in Billings, Montana. So it's kind of odd. And I said to him one day, I said, "Why do we lead and do things very similarly, even though we didn't come from the same families, just the same community?" And he looked at me and he says, "Because from the day we were born, Dave, the animals always ate first." And so him and I have been serving people and things in that kind of guise. And so that doesn't stop. And I think, if you stop and pause and absorb that for a minute, I think that that may be foundational to what we talk about when we talk about this CEO thing and going from being a great painter to running the paint company. So.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about that. The military teach you to be a leader, and let's say I've got a couple of contractors out there, and they might have a couple employees helping them getting along. That's to some point you got to have some help. But how do you expand on that and become a leader as far as how to grow in that team and so forth?
Well, so the team thing, you can't jump from entry level apprentice to CEO. Now, the reason I say that, well, to you and I, that makes perfect sense. We go, yeah, you can't do that. Well,
I mean,
there's some people generationally that think when they graduate college, they think that there's some shortcut. Like playing a board game. If you land on the magic spot, you get to slide almost to the end. It doesn't work. And so the only way that you can have 5 years of leadership experience is you have to lead for 5 years. That's it. I mean, that's the end of it. So you've got to learn. First of all, you're not going to be able to do this right, especially what you're talking about, because you're focusing on what does that team look like. You're talking about being a great finance officer, and then you're the CEO. Well, stop doing finance. Get the right finance person and let them. You got to get macro. You got to move your vision up to a different strategic point, and then you've got to not do the things that are comfortable. And the only way to do that is through your progression. You need somebody to mentor you. So you got to, and listen, you got to find and appoint a mentor. If you sit around waiting for somebody to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, come over here, let me put my arm around you and I'm going to mentor you," ain't going to happen. It is not going to happen. So if you aspire to great heights, you better look up, find somebody that you admire and ask them to lunch. And it's okay to look them in the eye and say, "I'd like to be here someday, and you seem to be a kind of person that can help me. Would you offer up that time?" I don't know anybody that I've ever talked to. I'm sure it's happened. I don't know anybody that I've ever talked to that said, "I don't have enough time," or "You're not worthwhile," or those kind of things. Now, there might be some hard conversations about you have a lot of work to do from where I sit. So you're going to have to take some tough feedback and those kind of things. But I've never seen anybody say they don't want a mentor. It's pretty flattering, actually, to have somebody want you in their life at that level. So you got to develop yourself. Hopefully you're working in a company that develops you. But when you hit that point when somebody says, "Here's your next job," it may be CEO, it may be CFO, it might be CIO. It doesn't matter. It might be, from manager to director. When they say that's your next job, you have to assimilate to that. And the military does promotions throughout the year to all of the ranks. Basically the competitive ranks, so E5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then when those results come out, they usually have some sort of celebratory thing. It's a big room full of everybody, people that supervise you and commanders, and there's a big room full of everybody. And later in my life, when I was doing my command tours, when I was leading as the senior enlisted leader on bases or even larger, I'd have my couple of minutes to say something. And what I would tell everybody in the room is this is a great day, but for all of you that lead this person that just got promoted, that's going to go from an E6 to an E7 or E7 to an E8, probably tomorrow when they put that stripe on, or they put their next bar on their shoulder, it's the rank that they assume, but don't assume that they know everything that they're doing, right? So they've got to grow into their new role. And so you have to do that too. But when you hit that macro piece, when you pull somebody up and put them in a position, it's not fire and forget either. There needs to be a level of relationship there where they have expectations and they understand that, and they have a potential, they get the opportunity to perform at the level that you want. But I'll let you give some perspective here, Chris. I think kind of where we're going and what's most passionate to me is that you have to assume the role that you're in. And the problem is that when CEO work, executive work gets hard, the easiest thing to do is run back to what you know best, which is some tactical thing that you know in your sleep, and you start to do that. And that gets observed as things like micromanagement in my business, doesn't trust me. It gets observed that way versus staying at the level that you're at, learning the job that you need to learn and learning the nuances of it. So, yeah.
Well, I had a podcast the other day with an episode, and we got to talking about, they're training people, and sometimes talking about the painters or the plumbers. Let's just talk about plumber.
Okay.
A plumber is better being a plumber than he is a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe instead of yourself going up, maybe you find somebody to run your business.
Right.
And that's a possibility. And because they're not all geared up for it, but there's a lot of how does the military look at, or how would you choose a person to go up? Now, is that meaning that you have to decide, hey, yourself, if you're the person to go up, but then if you decide to go up, then you got to bring somebody else too, or replace you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just automatic. A long time ago, I used to work in a company that you just got moved up just because you're the person that was there the longest.
Longevity,
not necessarily the right person. Because I'm assuming there are some in the military, there's ways of, they let you in and they just don't say, yeah, you sign up here, sign here, and you're good to go. But there are some physical things that they have to check on. But they don't always check for leadership, do they? But you gotta have grunts in the military
Right.
too, just like you do everything else.
The best example of that in the Air Force is what they would call an iron major. Major is the first rank in the field grade ranks, right? So the 2 lieutenant ranks, the captain rank, and then you have major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel, which are your field grade officers, and then your general officers above that. And they used to tag these guys and gals iron majors. And what it meant was they were the best aircraft commanders. They could lead a squadron. If you were doing the tactical stuff and you're flying missions every day, be it fighter missions, tanker missions, bomber mission, whatever it is. These were the guys that knew everything about the aircraft, everything about how to execute their portion of a mission. The guys that you wanted to lead the flight, right? That you wanted, the most senior guy in the combat environment. But they kind of stopped there because, one, they self-declared and said, my passion is flying. And I know that if I go past that and I start to become a commander of some sort, I'm going to get less flying time or no flying time. So I'm not going to be happy. And second of all, they may have been identified as they don't have the aptitude for that. There may have been a little test case there and somebody said, hey, that's not the guy we want to be the squadron commander, worrying about budgets and resourcing and equipping and supplying and those type of things. We need this guy out mentoring young pilots, making sure that they're progressing. If you got a pilot that's a little bit mediocre, you're pairing him up with this guy because he's getting them through. So it's the iron major. So that really is job matching, right? You need to have a skill where you do that. Now, unfortunately, Chris, sometimes this is how you find it out. You're in an institution. Let's use automotive stuff because it's easiest for people to understand because they kind of understand the whole assembly line thing, the Eli Whitney thing, right?
Sure.
And so a guy comes and he hires on with General Motors and they put him on the shop floor and he is the guy that puts the left front fender on the car. And he does that. And actually, he's really good at it. And he's always at work. He's on time. He's conscientious, those kind of things. And every once in a while, when the boss is gone, he does the schedules or whatever. And you think, you know what, this guy's ready to be a supervisor over XYZ area. And he might even do that well. He might do that well. He's got relationships. And when somebody's sick, he can fill in on their part of the line because he knows how to do that. But that next step where he's a manager and now he's off of the line and really what he has to worry about is, train, equip, organize, resourcing, those kind of things.
Hmm.
He stinks at it. And a lot of times when you're above that piece, we get paralyzed there and we go, oh, well, gosh, we're stuck with him and we can't move him back down and those kind of things. A lot of times you go have a conversation with that individual and they're as miserable in their job as you are concerned about their performance because their aptitude doesn't line up. So you have to deliberately develop people. This is a session building, right? Building, having a formalized a session plan. And if you're in a position where you've been developed properly, you can intuitively kind of pick people out that have attributes that fit into certain things. Some of those are the iron majors, and some of those are the next CEO. And so you have to put them in the next position that's challenging enough. I remember when I was in E7 and I was on a pretty aggressive path to being a chief and making E9 and doing more things, being a command chief. I was on a pretty aggressive path, didn't know it. And I wanted to go a certain direction with my career. And I had two people sit me down and they said, listen, you can go do this, but this is what you need to be doing if you're going to be here, 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 and here. And I thought, oh, okay. So I sat down, cut my mouth shut, and kind of listened to it. So people were deliberately developing me and putting me in the spots where I needed to be and to see how I would perform in those jobs. Very lucky, obviously they chose better than I did, and their vision ended up being exactly where I ended up and where what happened to me. So let's just put ourselves at the top. We're talking CEO from hard hat to CEO here. Let's put ourselves at the top, and you're looking down.
Hmm.
Organizationally, the thing that you need to do when you see these gaps, right? Why isn't that director performing well? Go have a conversation with them, and it sounds like this: are you happy in your work? Honest answer: are you happy in your work? Odds are they're probably going to say no. And then you say why. Now you're in a root cause analysis, right? Why? Get to the fifth why. You kind of got right. So you do a root cause analysis, and then you get to the fifth why, and you go, oh. And usually it'll sound something like this: I love the company, I love the people, I loved my last job. This makes me miserable. Well, maybe you're in a position where you can compensate that person for longevity and loyalty and the performance in their job and move them back into that space. And then they fit into that box, right? They understand when they go down there that that's probably where they're going to be. And then you need to manage that individual that way. You need to give them an opportunity. Most people, if you let them grow financially, will be okay with not having a director title, unless you give them a really crappy boss. But those people become your informal leaders in the company. Those are the people that run around and say, "Oh no, you're not stuck. Oh no, you need to have a conversation." As soon as you open those doors, so you got to build all of that foundation out. But the biggest pitfall is that when you get up to the top, and you'll hear people say a lot of things like, "Well, I'm up here now, and I already know how to do that work, so I'm not going to do it." Well, that's the wrong attitude, because whoever's doing the work needs to know how to do it. And if you have the knowledge is power only when shared, Chris. All of that stuff that you've got in your head, if you sit up there on the top and go, "Yep, I know all of that already," and you aren't out there saying, "Did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? How about this? Hey, here's something that I used." Pull something out of your file drawer, be it figurative or literal, your virtual or real file drawer, and say, "Hey, I used to use this tool," and leave it. That makes you stronger, Chris, not weaker. Stronger, not weaker. Knowledge is power only when shared. That's that's why you write a book, if you truly care about giving back. So,
well, in the construction, you show them those techniques that you've learned over the years, and you don't even have to take credit for it. If you say, "Listen, this is what my grandpa showed me one time," or whatever. And look, and then makes it quicker or faster. Or you decide. I mean, show me why yours is a better way. But it's a give and take and communication. Now, I'm probably can't do this in the military, but you can turn projects over to somebody and see how they do, right?
oh yeah, do it. We do it in the military. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll give you a story. I'm a storyteller, right? When I speak publicly, I
That's what
usually
we
tell
like. Yeah.
stories. So, so it's a brand new chief, brand new E9. For those that are listening, don't understand the military ranks, that's as far as you can go in the enlisted ranks. Is in the Air Force, it's Chief Master Sergeant, E9. That's your Marine Sergeant Majors and your Army Sergeant Majors. But I was pretty new. It's my first time being a group superintendent. So I'm in the
Yeah.
executive suite running a hospital, running a clinic. And I remember a couple of my master sergeants, E7s, came down to me and they were distressed over the fact that two of our E5s are really good tactical guys. I think it was a guy and a gal. We're going to be deployed. They were going to be deployed to some sort of contingency. And we had a big inspection coming up. And they said, man, if these people deploy, we're going to have trouble with the inspection. And what I told them was, I said, you don't know that. I said, who are the next two people underneath them? And they said things like, oh, that's just this person and this airman and that airman. And they've only been here for, a year and the rank is this and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I think that if you give it to them, it's going to be better than what the E5s are doing. Oh, it's going to be terrible. I said, well, the E5s are going away. They're going to go do the mission that's what they're supposed to do. They're going to go away. So these are the people, give it to them. Chris, those two people knocked it out of the park. They killed it. And they came back to me and they said, we didn't know. And I said, because you didn't give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
Now that could have been one of them knocked it out of the park and the other one needed a lot of work. And then we know that, right? And so it's discovery learning. But you don't put people in situations where if they fail, it's nuclear. You put them in situations that when they fail, they bounce in a net and you take them down and then you put them back on the high wire, right? And actually, you don't ever have to let them make them work without a net, unless it's an emergency, right? My graduate work is all in disaster management, so I'm that guy that handles the hurricanes and the earthquakes and all that stuff when they happen and prepares for them. And in emergencies where you have to make, like in emergency medicine, where you have to make quick decisions, sometimes you need to step in and just intervene and say, we're going to do this, 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 and this. Because and they don't. And it's a life or death thing, or it's a loss of property, whatever it is. But when that's over, you go back and share all the knowledge so that it goes into their computer bank, right? Knowledge is power, only when shared. So it goes into their computer bank, because anything that even looks similar, the next time those actions are going to happen without you. So absolutely. I mean, test casing people is an absolute. Don't call somebody and say, hey, congratulations, you're the director of so-and-so, and move to your office tomorrow and we'll talk later. You need to ask them, I'm considering making you the director of so-and-so, and how do you feel about that? And what's the, do you have any reservations? Because sometimes people will go, I'm flattered that you want to give me the job, but you better give it to Joe. Joe's going to be the guy. And sometimes somebody in your organization will point at somebody and go, that's the better option.
They know it better than you do sometimes.
It's amazing. So you have to do these things. And, really what we're talking about is no matter where you're leading from, I think that the second most important thing that you'll do in a lifetime is lead other human beings, short of raising children. Raising children first, leading other human beings, you leave indelible marks all over society. And some of them you can't take back. So you better make sure they're positives. I can tell you, my book's full of all kinds of stuff I screwed up. Times when my emotional intelligence jacked me up, times when my ego got in the way, times, people love that, by the way, Chris. You want to build a tribe of followers? Talk about failure.
Failure.
As soon as you say I screwed something up, they lean in. They're right. Their ears are wide open. They're like, oh, I can't wait to. It's like a 15-minute short clip, where it's all about how somebody screwed up so bad that a whole building fell down. Everybody it's amazing. You start talking about, well, I did this and I did this and here were the outcomes and we were successful and we put a man on the moon. Man, sometimes you got to kick people to wake them up because they don't want to hear about that. So take good notes as you go so that you can share that. That's the knowledge. You can share that so that people can be successful. And you'll find out people that want to do it the hard way, and they're a little more stubborn, and you work with them on that.
Yeah. Any insight on training people?
Mm. Well, we've really screwed training up as Americans. We like gratification as Americans. We want things to be quick. And if I tell you, Chris,
Mm-hmm.
if I tell you that that everybody, well, here, I'll give you a medical example. Everybody has to have CPR training, right? And you
Yeah,
have to, and you have to read. Well, it's no, you can't work. I mean, it's right in your job description.
Oh, okay.
If you're not CPR certified in certain positions in a hospital,
Oh, in a hospital, yes.
everybody in the hospital has to know CPR, right? Because you could just
Sure.
be sitting there and a patient tips over.
Yep.
But you have to recertify, right? You've got to go back, take a refresher course. You got to do whatever it is.
Right.
Now, to meet the standard to keep your hospital certifications, pass your inspections, do that type of stuff, to meet your standard, you have to say if this person went and did this, and then there has to be a tick block on a figurative or literal spreadsheet, right? So I've got a spreadsheet and it's got 100 people on there, and it's got everybody's date on when they're due, and then you got little green and red and yellow blocks, right? The yellow says they're coming due, and the red says they're overdue, and you chase those blocks to keep all of that stuff done. But if the quality of the training for CPR is of a nature that's kind of knowledge based and not comprehensive based, where you don't got to demonstrate it. You just say out loud, oh yeah, I do 30 compressions, and then I do 2 breaths, and then I call somebody and I do, oh yeah, okay, well, it seems like you know what you're doing, versus actually pushing on something, the right depth, and making sure that it's proficient. You've missed the boat. So training, if you're a CEO and you're going to train your people, you have to invest in the training. There's no shortcuts in training. There's only one way to have a comprehensive knowledge of how you're trained. Because the only reason that you train is that you're training people to muscle memory. This is a military thing. Do you think that everybody that shows up at Army or Marine Corps, I use this because these are the two main, but all the services, do you think any young man or woman that shows up at Army, Marine Corps basic training has the ability to run towards gunfire and shoot another human being?
Oh, I would think no.
No. How do they get to that point?
Gradually, I assume.
With
I
training.
mean, might be fast, yes, but
Well, I mean, with training, right?
right.
And well, first of all, there's permissions, but they train you. And do you think that when they come out of basic training and they have all their core basic stuff, do you think that they go to their next job and somebody says, oh yeah, you had that in basic training, you're good to go for the next? No. You know what they say? They say, oh, hey, welcome. Here's the training schedule. Here's when we're training. It's a constant over and over again. What happens in I would say in American corporate business at too high of a percentage is that training's inconvenient because we're working on the 5 meter target, right? We're working on what's going on today. Training's inconvenient because, well, I can't lose Chris for 2 days to do this training, and I can't send Chris over here to do this training because it costs this much. And so you start trimming away at the training budget, trimming away at the development, because training is development, right?
Yes.
After pay and benefits, the third most important retention modality that you can have in your company is training. And people don't even realize that. You want somebody to stay with your company? You want to get rid of your retention, recruiting, and turnover problems? Train your people. Send them to training. Deliberately develop them. Put that time and effort into them. They stay. And you know
Why do
what?
you think that is?
Well, first of all, it's personalized, right? Nobody
Yeah.
cares how much you know until they know how much you care about them. So that is a form of caring.
True.
Right. The other thing is making you have to make you've got to make time and space for people to have human things. Mothers die, children get sick, all that stuff. You got to be able to do that. Right. You can't look at that as you can't. Work should never override our ability to function as humans in a healthy fashion, right? So you need to create an environment where people rest well at night, knowing that if something pops up, that they're not going to lose their job, or their boss isn't going to give them a black mark because their kid got sick or their husband broke his leg or whatever it is. So,
Right.
so you got to work through that. But the training piece is inherently individual. You know, think about what if I sent you, if you worked for me right now, Chris, and I sent you a note and I said, and I just forwarded something to you and I said, you know, Chris, I think that this 3-day conference in Orlando for monetary management of logistics, I think this perfectly fits where you're at. Go ahead and get signed up, and here's who you contact this person at finance to get your pay and your travel schedule. That is the first thing you talk about at the dinner table.
Oh yeah. Guess what?
Right? And you're like, wow. And then you go, he asked me to do this. Why did he ask me to do this? And then somebody was probably going to say, because you're good and you're going to put time and effort in. Now you tell me when it comes time, when somebody puts a business card in your hand and goes, hey, if you're ever thinking about leaving this place, let me know. That person's probably going to look at the other person and go, what do you do to develop me? What do you do for my training stuff? And if they can't match you, they're not leaving. It's the third retention piece.
I did not know that.
And I'm telling you, and CEOs blow this off, this development thing. It's too expensive. There's too much time. We can't invest in it. And so they'll crowd 120 people in a room, give them 12 briefings over 1.5 days, and call that
Right.
staff development training, and then everybody back to work. Right. So it's on the calendar. We know we can fence it off so it doesn't confuse you with anything. You should never have 100% of your workforce in the office every day. Somebody should be training, even if it's for an hour, and it should be paid.
Oh yeah. People think the same thing about maintenance sometimes. Well, this is not a maintenance conversation, but they'll say that's, maintenance is important. And maintain your people, maintain your equipment, whatever. It's all important. Yeah.
Aren't they the same?
Well, yes.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If General Electric tells me that this aircraft engine needs to have the fan blades completely taken out, x-rayed and inspected, and then put back in every 2 years, and maybe your margins in the company are a little thin, and you go, man, every time that we pull those blades out, it costs $150,000 in manpower and equipment to do one engine, right? If we just defer that maintenance by 6 months, we can save $17.5 million. Good idea? Bad idea?
Bad idea.
Hey, Chris, that's happening. That decision's happening right now in three major corporate executive offices while we're doing this podcast.
What they don't foresee is what happens when it goes bad. What is the cost of that?
The size of the check that they have to write if an airplane goes down and that maintenance was deferred is a lot more than $17.3 million.
Oh, absolutely.
But because we are culturally set up to fail our people, Chris, I tell people all the time, we're almost on the second full generation of people that we have neglected on deliberate development. And then we scream out loud as to, well, there's no leadership. I'm leaving this place because there's no leadership. Leadership and management are completely different. And we raised 2 generations of hyper managers who actually say out loud, I'm the leader of this section and I'm the leader of that section. And if you watch the people that work for them, a lot of times their nonverbals tell you exactly whether or not they're anywhere near a leader versus a hyper manager.
Are people born leaders?
Oh, there's a chapter in the book.
Yes, sir.
That says leaders aren't born. It's just to get your. Listen, I'm an only child raised by my mother.
Okay.
If you do some PhD level work on leaders, they say that only sons raised by their mothers tend to be good leaders when they get out in the world. Eisenhower and I think MacArthur, Patton, those kind of people. So does that mean I was born into that, or does that mean that my environment shaped us? So I'm a firm believer in we're products of two things, Chris, that influence us. Our genetics. Can't do a lot about that other than the fact if you find out that you have a predisposition to diabetes, you probably should eat a certain way the rest of your life. But you're probably going to get diabetes, or you're going to get skin cancer, or whatever it is. I mean, if that's just kind of where you're baked in. The second thing is your environment. So you're old enough, you probably remember the movie Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, right?
Yes.
And all that movie is about, even though it's hilarious, all that movie is about is proving that environment. You're not born poor, you're not born dumb, you're not born. If you just change the environment and the situation, people can perform very well, right? So, are leaders born or are they created? I think the answer is yes. I think sometimes you can be born into an environment that sets you up to lead because you have to learn. So if you're on a dairy farm and you're 7 years old and somebody's taught you to drive a tractor and the truck, and you're driving well before 16, I guess you kind of got a lead in, and you have somebody that's deliberately developing you because they don't want to haul all the hay, or they don't want to clean the pig pen, or all those kind of things. So they train you up really quick, right? That's a phenomenon on the farm. If you're a man on the farm, or male on the farm, as quick as possible, as soon as you're strong enough, you're going to do the task because it's helpful, right?
You can steer on the wheel to make the steering. You're going to be able to drive the truck.
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. Or, just hold your foot right here. Don't go any faster or any slower. And you kind of learn that, and you screw that up, and you get some counseling, and it all works out.
Counseling. That's what I called it. Counseling. Yeah.
But at the same time, a smart farmer lets his kid, when he's 12, look over his shoulder while he's paying bills. Has him standing there while he's talking to the feed man on how to mix the grain to get the best protein mix so that the cattle perform. All that type of stuff, right? So that you're learning. So you're learning those type of things. Now, here's the deal: is our emotions, right? Our emotional intelligence and those kind of things are kind of baked in. And so I don't care how good a leader you are, you're not going to resonate with everybody. You're not going to resonate, No. And I'll tell you, when the California fires were burning, and you got to remember the disaster management in me, and the mayor was up there talking on the television. I was going through everybody that was standing behind the mayor. Didn't know them. I just, from their body language and the way that my wife was sitting next to me, and I said, that guy's scared to death, doesn't know what he's talking about. That guy hopes he never sees the microphone. And then I pointed at one individual and I said, that's the person that knows everything that's going on. That's the voice of reason. That's going to be the person to sort it out. And that happened to be the fire chief that ended up getting fired by the mayor, because she's the one that got up and spoke truth to power and said, we don't have the resources. You remember? Yeah. You remember? My wife goes, how did you know that? And I said, because I've been doing this so long that I can read a room at that level. Well, people can read their leaders.
Yeah.
And you got to show up. These books, my buddy the other day used my book as an example in a job interview. They asked what book he was reading, so he used my book to talk to him about it. And they said, well, what about the book is the number one thing that pops out? And he goes, Dave takes leadership and really boils it down to the basics. And he said, the number one thing right at the top of what's necessary is presence. You have to be present. Nothing else happens. You can't lead by hitting the send button. Another chapter, by the way. You can't lead by hitting the send button. That doesn't work. If you got bad news, go to the point where it needs to be delivered. Get everybody together, deliver the bad news, listen to the other side of the story, adjust accordingly, and then support them through whatever the issue is. That's leadership. People don't want to do that. That's yucky. It makes you uncomfortable. Might make you lose sleep, right? Bad leadership is the laissez-faire, just get it done, whatever. I've had people that today, years later, have written me and said, man, you had me so upset back in X, Y, and Z, and not until Not until a couple of years later did I realize what you were doing. And what I was doing was I was giving them opportunity. They thought I was giving them my work. Well, no, I was
Yeah.
getting the next batch of work that was getting me ready for my next job. So I needed to give them my batch of work. And you have to go down and explain that to them, and you have to be supportive. You just can't dump it on them and let them fail miserably and again lose a night's sleep over stuff. You got to go down and support them and tell them that's fine. I don't expect you to do it as fast as I do. I don't expect you to do it exactly the same way. What I expect you to do is build your own style and morally, ethically, and legally get to the same point that we need to get in the right amount of time. Other than that, I don't care how you do it. So, yeah, so there's a lot there. So are leaders born? I think everybody that's born can be a leader,
Mm-hmm.
but to lead appropriately, it's more work for others than some. There's some inherent things that we're born with, or our initial environment sets us up to be successful. And other people have to work a little bit harder as they're put in leadership positions to develop their styles and their situational approaches and those kind of things. So it's like anything else. If you told me right now that I needed to go fix the drain in the kitchen, I would slide underneath there and I would do that. I wouldn't think twice about it. If you told me I needed to build an Excel spreadsheet and do some sort of charting and those kind of things, I'd freak out and start sweating, and then I'd go find somebody that knows how to do it.
Gotcha. I'm a big proponent of communication, obviously, and sharing information. So you got to get down into details, but I think the team needs to have an idea where you're at and understand where we're going, and kind of give them, here's where we're at right now. And here's the next step or something like that. And here's our goals, and here's where we're at with the goals. What's your thoughts on that?
So there's only two kinds of communication, Chris. As a leader in an organization, there's only two. Can you guess what they are?
Verbal and nonverbal.
Right. So that's the schoolroom answer, right? That's the schoolroom answer, right?
All right. Yeah.
The Dave Nordell answer is not enough and too much.
Okay.
So you've got to pick. Sometimes, very rarely, you need to withhold a certain amount of information based on the situation. Most of the time, you need to communicate. So it goes like this. You put something out and somebody goes, oh, great. Why did I get this? It doesn't pertain to me. Right. And I got 3 of those today, and this is just garbage in my email box, and it's too much for me to absorb. Take that piece of information and compartment it and send it out to only the people that you think need it, and then let them go to the water cooler and go, hey, did you know on Thursday we're doing this? And then somebody goes, this place sucks because they don't communicate.
Yeah.
So there's not enough or there's too much. So you got to pick. I'm a fan of over communicate, but you have to tell people that. You have to tell people you're probably going to get more emails from me than you desire, but I really don't have any other way to get the information to everybody, and I need to be considerate of everybody because I don't know who it affects, and if the organization's that big, I don't know everybody. So manage it accordingly. Give me feedback as you need. If you have questions, ask. That's number one. Number 2 is clear, concise, and credible, right?
Yeah.
And consistent. So it's really C4, right? Which is explosives. So communication is explosive. It's the most important thing you do. In disaster management, when we have a real disaster, or we have an exercise, and you do the post-mortem and you write up areas for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to have a template on that, you could go to areas for improvement and write communication on it and just start filling it in. Every single one. Fires in California or a dam break exercise in Pennsylvania or whatever, when it's all over with, people are going to sit down and go, the communication sucked. It's a constant because there's so many. It's how people are conditioned to receive and process information, and it's diverse. It's not like one or two types. It's almost every individual does it differently. And you're not going to be able to communicate in a way where you're going to get everybody to absorb it. So you have to communicate consistently, clear, and it has to be credible, right? So you need to make sure that you got your data correct, because you can lose people when you don't, especially if it's not credible. You can lose people. One piece of bad information takes 5 more pieces of communication to fix the bad the bad press. And so, you know, you need to be careful with that. The other thing is during COVID, I was incident commander for a university during COVID. And one of the things I did was town halls every week. And I had, as the leader, I had the subject matter experts in the room, and they talked on the subject matter expertise. And I was lucky enough to have a biologist, a PhD biologist. In fact, he's my buddy, the one I grew up with. And
Yeah.
I had him on my team so he could talk to the virus, you know, the specifics of the virus. And I had somebody from the healthcare administration on there. And then me as a commander, I talked, and then the president of the university would talk. So everybody was kind of there. But when I presented that to people as a best practice, they said, that didn't work for us. And the one of the outside observers, when we were having the conversation, said, Dave, he goes, were they allowed to ask questions? And I said, yeah, on the spot. And he goes, was there a continuous feedback loop? And I said, yeah, when we got off, if we didn't have the answer to the question, we got back to the person immediately. And we left an open communication loop, almost like just a chat where you could at any point in time type in any of your concerns. He goes, that's why it worked. Most CEOs want to transmit.
Oh, you want an open loop.
If you have an open loop, guess what you have to do? Then you got to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Because your idea is really good, but when you give it to 150 people,
yeah,
they're gonna punch holes in it. They're gonna, well, and it's okay. You know
and
what?
No, it is perfect. They think differently.
Yeah, and it's absolutely okay, because a lot of times there's an ability to reward people, and I'll tell you, the magic of that is, in your organization, you'll find potential leaders, people that can probably lead the whole company, that you would have never found because they're introverts. And if you set up a form of communication that fits their introversion, and they can actually process, you know, where they don't have people like me, extroverts, eating up all the oxygen in the room and running over the top of them and never giving them a chance. I learned to not do that. If they don't have that and they have a chance to process, when they actually do have a Q&A, an interaction, it's quality stuff.
Well, that actually leads, before we wrap up, I got my
Sure.
last part. And actually, I wrote it down before you even mentioned it. So, talking about feedback or praise, you know, and reward, you know, what do you recommend on that? As far as, you know, you got to tell people. I found that praising people wasn't normal to me. It was just, I appreciated them, but I just didn't physically say it.
Sure.
And I had one ways of doing that, little pennies in the pocket and put in one.
Yeah.
And by the time you do one, the pennies are in the other pocket type thing.
Yeah.
And so what kind of recommendations do you have there?
A couple things. One is, first of all, if you suck at it, find somebody to help you with it. So, and I say that out loud. And if I'm going to start leading a team, I say, here's the thing is, Dave can get very focused on success and working on the things that need to be improved. And sometimes we'll hit a home run someplace, and I'm like, it's just a home run. We got to score 5 more runs, right? And I kind of drive through that. So you have to pause. You got to build in a pause to celebrate. Ice cream seems to be the universal winner with celebrations, by the way. I was taught that by a leader one time. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Man, if you work in an office setting, man, get a tray, put about three varieties of ice cream on there and start wheeling it around and saying, I just want to give you some ice cream. That's a retention tool of the highest order. Gotcha. This whole celebratory thing, you got to get it right. So I'll give you an example. When you're leading millennials, right? The millennials are kind of timing out. The Z's are pushing hard on the millennials now. They're in the it's kind of thing. The millennials are kind of timing out as the focus point. We're really in the Z piece, but so the geriatric millennials are all in their 40s, right?
Yeah.
But those people, when I was leading them, I quickly found out that there was 2 things that motivated them, and it wasn't like even days off or that kind of thing. They had to have daily affirmation that they were doing a good job. Even if all they did was come in and hit the widget and you had to say, I appreciate you being here today. You did a great job. I'll see you back tomorrow. Thanks for being here. That kind of thing. They need that. The second thing is once a week, they needed some sort of written communication that was a non-email that told them that they were doing well. The sticky note that says, I so appreciate you're really making a difference, and sticking it on their computer. Now, I thought this was all raging BS because I'm a boom Xer. I'm a X boomer or whatever that. I'm right on that line.
I hear you. Yep.
And I thought, this is crap. You know, back in my day, they'd give me a plaque and say you were employee of the month, and that would work for the next 5 years for me, right? And I thought it was terrible, but I stayed to the practice. And
Sure.
when I was a command chief in Washington, anytime somebody had an Air Force anniversary, it was the month that they came in, or they got promoted, it was a form letter that was printed out, but it was personalized, had their name and rank and everything on it. And then I signed it. So if they picked it up and looked at it, they could see that I actually put a pen on that. I looked at it, saw who it was, and put a pen on. And I thought, yeah, you know, we'll see what happens. I would go out into duty sections, into work areas, and people would have this stuff pinned up in their cubicles. And I'd be like, you have my letter pinned up there. And they're like, oh, yeah, I've made like 5 copies. I sent one to my mom. And, you know, they go on and on and on and on. And I'm thinking, a piece of paper with a nice professional note signed by me, recognizing just a little glimpse in their year.
Yeah.
What do you think I did for retention, recruiting, leadership, all that type of stuff? So you have to reward people. Now, don't dilute your reward system. Don't dilute it. It has to be special. Everybody else around has got to go to that person and go, man, what did you do to get that, you know, that, I don't know, the parking spot? What did you do to get that? Well, I was doing this and this and this, and they recognized me for this. People will start stepping up their game. We used to do a thing. If you lived on base, if you lived on the military base, the command staff would drive around and award the yard of the month. Well, that sure fixed lawn mowing problems, didn't it? It fixed, you know, people put flowers out, things look nice. So yeah. So there you go.
Before I go, I got to mention my grandson who I have today, and he's 5 years old, and in kindergarten, and you get this thing in the, I guess they put it on Facebook, but my daughter sends it to me, and get caught being good, and they get their little, they got their little thing there. I got caught being good, you know, and can you imagine how that works? And everybody, you know, he wants to be caught being good more than once, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and I think they get ice cream once a month.
I'm telling you, it's
you know,
ice cream is a force multiplier.
Yep. So, David, thank you for your time today. It's been a real pleasure.
You bet.
How would people get hold of you or find your book and all that good stuff?
Oh yeah. I'll make it easy. It's maxfabconsulting.com, MAXFAB consulting.com. Yeah, if we ever do another podcast, we can do it all on MaxFab. That's a whole organizational thing too, leadership stuff. But if you go there, the books are there, the blogs are there, my own podcast is there. You can get it, the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. Maybe I should have you on. We'll double back. Yeah, it'll be a good time. And you'll find out a little bit more about me. But the magic thing is just click the Contact Dave button, and you can, we can chit chat for up to 45 minutes. I won't charge you anything, and we can just, do a little mentoring, right? So,
absolutely. And if you like what Dave and I were talking about today, you can reach me down in the show notes, Chris G, and we'll do the hardhattheceo.com. And also, I'm doing some workshops on Tuesdays, Dave. So,
cool.
Yeah. So, find that information down below. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day.